So as Paula already said, we are going to concentrate on the commercialization of deep tech, and with this panel specifically on the challenges and opportunities and the fit between the Nordics and Silicon Valley. My name is Gro, and I currently head Xplora. We make kids smartwatches. That is a safer alternative to smartphones. But I also have a background as a venture capitalist and as a board member and advisor. And as Paula said, as the mother of Reach, and I will come back to that. But before we talk about Reach, I want to introduce you to these amazing panelists. And I hope I can give you the respect you deserve, because you both have very long bios. But I will try to be efficient. So Leah Edwards started out her career in management consulting, where she launched new products for companies like Intuit, Oracle, Apple, IBM. She's been part of founding teams of enterprise SaaS companies. She has had leadership roles in sustainability startups. She's found and exited her own marketing technology startup, and she serves on boards, advisory boards, and is also an executive coach and lecturer of UC Berkeley's Engineering School and Deep Tech Innovation Lab. She started her involvement in higher education as a director of the Center of Entrepreneurial Studies at Stanford back in 2012. And she holds a bachelor from Berkeley and an MBA from Stanford, so very much a product of Silicon Valley. Moving on to Shomit. So Shomit is a partner of ClearVision Ventures, a Silicon Valley-based venture fund investing in energy and infrastructure sustainability. Before then, he was a general partner at Onset Ventures, where he invested in early-stage startups, with data-centric startups from 2001 to 2021. And prior to that, he was an entrepreneur for 19 years and participated in several commercialization successes and successful exits. He's a lecturer at UC Berkeley's College of Engineering, where he teaches data and AI. He's also an adjunct professor of entrepreneurship and innovation at the University of San Francisco, and an entrepreneurial advisor at the University of California, Riverside. He has served at multiple public and private boards and scientific advisory boards, and he holds a degree in computer science from Berkeley. Just watch them and become more intelligent. But no. Well, so as you can all understand, these panelists are amazing resources for entrepreneurs, but maybe particularly so for those of you who come from more research-based backgrounds, because they have unique understanding of the dynamics between education, academia, research, and commercial success. And that, my friends, is the essence of both our panel today, but also Reach. Reach started out as an acknowledgement from researchers and funders of research that too much great research ends up as just that, research. And at the same time, entrepreneurs came to us and said, we wish we had been exposed to an ecosystem such as Silicon Valley at a much earlier stage of our commercialization journeys. And so that led us to ask, why are there not more great commercial successes based on Nordic research results? Is it because the researchers don't want to? They have great lives as researchers? Is it because they don't know how to? Or is it because they don't have access to the right resources? This started out, the first pilot of Reach back in 2015. And our insight suggested that the reason why we don't see more successes out of Nordic research from a commercial perspective is they are not exposed to the resources that similar, let's say, profiles are exposed to here. And so with that, we started Reach, and since then, how many projects or entrepreneurs, researchers have been through? Paula, do you have the number? 60 projects, so more than 100 researchers and entrepreneurs since then. And there are success stories, and I'm sure Paula will come back to them. But before then, we will move into picking these wonderful people's brains with regards to the challenges, opportunities of taking deep tech research results from the Nordics to Silicon Valley-based or Silicon Valley-style commercial successes. Let's call it that. So, Shomit, let's start with you. Are there any stories from your career when it comes to commercializing research that you can share with us, and what did you learn from that?
So there are many, and some of them, of course, didn't work out so well, and this is where the learning is. I think it's really easy as a technologist to fall into the trap of thinking that the technology is what it's all about. But as Negin mentioned earlier, it's really about the business model. And I think what is really a unique aspect of Silicon Valley is that you think of this place as being as an innovation powerhouse for technology. It's actually an innovation powerhouse for business models. And that's really what drives it. So when you think about the technologies that you have, we have to think about it in terms of the business model. And we spun out a bunch of companies out of UC system, mostly at my last fund, and not all of them panned out. And unfortunately, the reason that they didn't pan out is because the focus was too great on the X factor of the technology, where it should have been on the Y factor of why does anyone care? Yeah, so that's really what we need to think about. So yeah, many situations there. I had to rescue one of those companies. It's a company that had been foundering. I think Jennifer will remember that particular company. We used to work together at Onset. But that company, the original CEO went through about $15 million in about 2 years. And hold on a sec, what the revenues were. Revenues were zero, sorry. Had to do some math, yeah. 0 plus 0 is still 0, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so yeah, and here was the thing which was really kind of scary is we could not walk away from this deal. So I had to step in there for a couple of years. We sold the company to Cisco, which was great. This is actually one of the other things here with Silicon Valley too, is that it's possible to recover if you get focused on the business model, and that's what we were able to do. And what we leveraged actually to drive that exit was we leveraged the partnerships that we had. I know I've spoken to a bunch of you, and I've said, partnerships are super important. Yeah, we exited to a couple of partners, and both of the partners were, relationships, like personal relationships that had from a long time. So when you think about the power that you bring into your entrepreneurial enterprise, the learnings you can bring, think about connecting with everybody. So here you are, for example, at the Reach, meet everybody, make sure you know everybody. You never know who might help you in a partnership going forward.
Great, thank you. Leah, can I ask you the same question?
Oh, certainly. So one of the things that I do now at UC Berkeley is I teach in a deep tech innovation lab where we're teaching students that are in the MBA school and students in the law school and graduate students of engineering all together. And so they're all having other courses and they're getting exposed to different ideas. And one of the things that I've found in trying to bring the lessons of my career to the students in a really practical way is that in business school we learn a lot about how people are very resistant to change and how there's an endowment effect of people overvalue what they already have, what they're already doing. It's very hard for people in the labs that we work with to not understand that if they're showing a 50% improvement in some function or even 10% maybe could be very valuable in certain industries, that isn't convincing and that people won't immediately buy. And so one of the things I've really seen is that if it really can benefit people to go through lots of mentoring or go through co-curricular experiences where people just really help you understand who can you talk to, how can you understand how they think about the issue, and actual technical function may only be 10% of the decision-making process. And so you mentioned that I very early in my career worked it was a joint venture of Apple and IBM. So at the board level, these two companies had decided they were going to come up with a new operating system to challenge Microsoft. And it was, best I could tell, to sort of tongue-in-cheek summarize it, it was a product manager of an IBM computer that had to embed an operating system on the machine that didn't want a 10% increase in cost of goods to put because we first came out with development tools and we wanted to ship them on the IBM machines. So there was resistance at the level of a product manager for something that had been decided at the board level of these companies, and Taligent eventually folded. So there really is a lot you have to understand about who are the people, what are the way decisions get made, how do they value things, how do they think about what's worth adopting and what it would take to change, and what are all the complications, because great things often don't make it to market for these complicated systems.
Excellent, thank you so much. So you've both been exposed to a lot of startups, both out of that were founded out of an experienced need, but also a lot of examples from research results that were kind of looking for a problem to solve. What's the difference between the two? So when you try to commercialize something coming out of research?
I'll go first this time. Well, I'll just pick up where I left off, because I mean, this is what we're doing in this course that we've created, the Deep Tech Innovation Lab, is we're in the fall semester partnering with labs like NASA and Lawrence Berkeley Lab and even Hewlett Packard. We can work with commercial labs as well. And they're literally finding patents, and I worked when I was at Stanford, I also worked with our patent office to say, what do we look through the database, what do we think might have an application that could be commercialized, and created student projects there as well. And so in both situations, we're trying to figure out, and the good thing about being on a university campus is when you have just a semester, or at Berkeley it's just a quarter, you have this real life time, time is ticking away. You have a short amount of time to try to figure out where on earth could there be a market for this. And that's very realistic for how things work in real life, because time is money. And so either startup companies or corporations can only invest a certain amount of time for any given patent that they have in thinking about, is there really a product, is there really a market? And so trying to find experts to help you, because you can try to go linearly and try to say, I'm going to go interview people in this industry, this industry, this industry. That just takes too much time. So you have to actually find people that have a good sense of where, particularly in industry, often I see the deep tech solutions going into industry, that there really is a problem so big that people will actually pay attention. They may not say for sure on a first meeting, you've got the right solution, but there are people out there looking because they have such a deep need. They already feel the need, and that's where you actually have a chance to kind of meet in the middle. They've already identified they have a need, and as opposed to trying to convince them, we can improve things. You might think you're fine with the status quo, but really it could be better. That's a hard sell, as I was mentioning before, but try to find people in industry that can tell you they know that they're wasting too much time or money in this place, and they're out seeking. And I had a good experience with that because I worked in corporate venture capital for a while, and we would literally get a list from the corporate LPs of what problems they wanted to solve, and that's super helpful in going up and trying to make meetings with the scientists and trying to help them create that match. Right.
I think Leah already said everything, so not much to add. Importantly, as a academic researcher, of course, you're not solving yesterday's problem. Actually, not even solving today's problems. You have to solve tomorrow's problems. So when you think about how you go to market, how you speak about your technology to investors in particular, it's about tomorrow's problems. And as I think I've mentioned to those of you who I've spoken to, path to exit for a startup nowadays is about 7 years. So you get your Series A check today, 2025, you're going to be exiting in 2032. What does the world look like in 2032? That's what you're going to be speaking to. Okay, so if you say, I solved today's problem, investors like us are going to say, oh, that's really nice, we don't care. This already got financed 5 years ago. Yeah.
Is that the timeline different for research-based startups typically, or?
I would say it doesn't matter because you've got some foundational innovation, which is great, but of course what we care about is what is the business model innovation. In fact, what will the business model look like 7 years from now, roughly? Work back from that, map that to what we're doing today. Another thing which I think is kind of intrinsic in every Silicon Valley company is we focus on scale. So at no time does the Silicon Valley company startup show up at a VC saying, Leah, I'm going to dominate the California market. Right? California is the world's fifth largest economy, but you'd never hear something like that, exactly. But so often I hear European startups saying, we're going to come here, we're going to dominate the market in Sweden. After we solidify this, we're going to cross the big water to Denmark. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Right? So don't fall into that trap. From day one, you have to have this global focus. Think about Google, Netflix, et cetera. All of them were global from day one. The same product we were experiencing here on their day one was the same one you were experiencing somewhere else. Global scalability is impactful. That's what people invest behind.
So you were actually touching on my next question here, which is we're working with Nordic startups here. Does it matter where they come from, and what are the advantages and disadvantages that you see?
Yeah, so the disadvantages for those of you who are Swedish or Norwegian, probably jantelo, right? Yeah, exactly. All right, so we'll come back to that. But no, it doesn't matter because what business are VCs in? We're in the business of making money. Do we care where the source of that money is? We don't care. But for us to understand that we're going to make money, you have to come tell us a big story. If you tell us a little story and the next company comes in and it's a Silicon Valley company and they're all Hollywood, they tell us a big story, guess who gets the money? Right? So don't fall into that trap. Don't sacrifice your future by being limited by jantelo. So all of you, 'cause I've spoken, I think maybe all of you here, you're all doing, is anyone here doing something not impactful? Yeah, I didn't think so. Exactly. Right. So this is the thing. You're doing things that are impactful, that are evergreen, that have global impact. Tell that big story. Don't shy away from it. I think also I've counseled many of you to think about what is your little sound bite, because you bump into somebody at Starbucks here, you want to let them know right off the bat that you're somebody that they want to hear from. So.
I absolutely agree, and I think that it doesn't really matter, especially in deep tech. I do think that maybe there would be a little bit of a bias against some foreign startups that are doing something that seems pretty replicable. That was sort of like if you're coming to us with an idea that is, seems like it could be very easily copied, it just might be easier to work with a US-based company. It's pretty frequent in a non-deep tech investment scenario that whatever you're being pitched, you've probably seen 10 companies more or less giving you the same pitch. So you're more or less choosing by team, maybe a little bit by traction and who the customers are and things. But in deep tech, you have a chance to really say, we have the best. We have the best people with the best science in this area. And so in that case, a smart VC that wants to be successful at deep tech, that really understands what you're doing, is going to connect with you as people, as researchers, as what you're developing. And if they believe you have what it takes to scale, and that doesn't have to be you have fleshed out your team yet, but they get the sense that in a conversation you get it, how important the business aspect is and how important it will be to find those mentors and those team members and maybe fractional advisors and things that are going to help you get there. then they should be able to make a real connection with you and be really interested.
Great. So you mentioned some disadvantages, but are there any advantages you believe from the Nordics?
Well, I'll start with you're all very nice. I have to say, yes, I taught for the Norwegian School of Economics 3 summers in a row, and they were my favorite MBA students ever. And I've worked with some very nice MBA students over the years. So I do think that there is a, talk about your meeting, you're trying to see, is this a team I want to work with? Is this a team I feel confidence in? I feel a very, high level of I guess I've seen great presentations, and I've just seen real intense training and confidence, and have just had good experience. So I think you have a good reputation.
We'll invite you back.
Yeah. No, echoing exactly what Leah said, because also what happens here is sometimes people get tainted by arrogance, right? Because we're the center of the world, and none of you come off like that. As an investor, again, you're on a 7-year journey with this founder. Yeah. Do you want to be partnering with somebody you don't like? No, you want to be partnering with somebody you do like. And all of you come off so well, you're experts in your fields, work with that. Yeah, that's a superpower that you have. So these are the advantages. And I think the fact that you're not tainted by what sometimes happens here is the arrogance of, we're really hot stuff here. It's a positive. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't tell your story. Tell your story with confidence. If you don't tell your story with confidence, you're going to lose. But tell your story with confidence.
So I want to go back to your mandate with your fund, Shomit. You invest in energy and infrastructure sustainability. I get the feeling from Europe and maybe particularly the Nordic region that every fund and every founder has a sustainability story. Does that impact their pitches? When you invest in sustainability infrastructures, can the Nordic region bring anything that you don't see here, or is it just a different way of telling the story?
No, of course, people from different parts of the world have different perspectives, right? So we sometimes get trapped in the perspective of Silicon Valley. And guess what? The world doesn't look like Silicon Valley. So it's great to know the perspectives from elsewhere. So for what can Nordic deep tech companies bring here? You just bring different viewpoints, different perspectives. These are all good things. And yeah, everybody that walks in the door at our office, they're all pitching sustainability and/or they're pitching AI. Everybody. But it's easy to ferret out the people who are just kind of greenwashing themselves or AI washing themselves, because we're not naive about these topics, so we know the areas pretty well. So one of the things that all of you have in common is that you're actually bringing this technical substance with you. You're not posers, you're not fakers. That will come through. So don't forget that that too is a superpower, and that will help position you well.
So what would you say is the most critical success factor that you have seen for commercializing research?
Well, as Shomit mentioned before, the market has to be big. Even if you're, having the best technology absolutely positively of any team anywhere in the world, but it's not for something that could get to, billions in revenue, then a VC firm just cannot invest in you. I mean, it's not whether they like it, they like what you're doing, they like you, they think it's an important need. They have just restrictions in the way their business works, and it has to be something with a massive scale. So I think that if you're working on something super interesting and you don't yet have a vision of how that becomes a very, very big market, then I think get a really good advisor, because maybe if you thought about the value system that you're trying to enter into, is there a way you could go into the development of something in an industry where you could capture more? And it might be, it's got to be a roll-up of a couple different technologies, it's got to be in partnership, or some, there might have to be some creativity around it. But size matters, and it really is just sort of a black and white issue. And maybe a very creative investor that loves what you're doing can help work with you on it, that you don't have to have it figured out immediately when you get to them. But you have to understand that that is just a minimum requirement for the funds to get involved with you. And so most deep tech companies need money. You know, there's a lot of software companies that don't actually need a lot of money. I'm often trying to help people figure out how to bootstrap and get consulting and do other things that bring in cash and not go the VC route when it's not a deep tech company, but you probably don't have that chance. So you have to really, really understand the minimum requirements for many rounds of VC, and not just even the first people you're talking to, but how this is going to play out over time.
That's pretty much
Right.
it. You invest behind big markets, tell us why it's a big market. First words out of your mouth are, my name is Shomit, I'm going after the $50 billion market floor. That's how you message yourself, because that's what makes the VC's ears pick up.
Is that also the biggest mistake, to or look at too small markets, or are there any other things you want to add about mistakes?
Yeah, there are a lot of mistakes, of course. Committing the sin of going after a small market is probably the most cardinal of these sins, and you cannot go after a small market. When you tell me about the big market, quantify it, defend it to me. I want to hear that. Tell me why your business model is defensible. I don't care about your technology quite yet. Think about some of these huge successes like Netflix. What were their technology barriers? Kind of none. They were mailing out DVDs. It's the business model that allowed them to prosper. So don't lose sight of the fact that the business model wins. Technology comes only to help you defend the business model. As I think probably everyone I've spoken to here, you've heard me say again and again, partnerships are key. 95% of exits are by by acquisition. Your partners are the ones who are going to be acquiring you. So basically, the instruction here is, you're going to get married, you better start dating. Yeah. And it's going to be a long courtship process. So it may be, but we're just getting started. It's day one. Great. It's the perfect day to craft out your partner strategy and start on it right away. That too is a mistake, because oftentimes what happens is the company is not a rocket ship to the moon, and most companies are not. Leah, the company's not doing so. We should sell it. We should try and find somebody to buy it. This is the wrong time to be going out, plying the streets, trying to find a buyer. You want to have the buyer already locked in from partnership.
Thank you. You want to add something, Leah? Okay. The final question from me is, what is your best tips to these entrepreneurs who are sitting in front of us here?
Well, you're doing a great thing by traveling and meeting more people, expanding your network. And certainly while you're here in the Bay Area, there'll be tons and tons of events. I mean, I was working with some German startups just 2 weeks ago. I literally sat down on the computer with them and just started Googling on their behalf and saying, look, it's here. Look at these free events specifically in your category. And, you can go meet people. And I don't know if you'll still be here in 2 weeks, but San Francisco has a climate week every year. And so, make sure to meet people, and don't be shy to ask everybody to connect in with you on LinkedIn, so that you can follow up with them and, send a note and saying, thank you. Because the reason I love notes in LinkedIn is somebody maybe contacts me in 4 years and I can't remember the conversation. But if they made a note in LinkedIn, they said, oh, thanks for connecting with me at such and such event. And I'm like, aha, yeah, I remember that conversation. And it's very helpful.
Yeah, so what Leah said is really kind of it. Network like maniacs. There was a study done out of Berkeley some years ago. They compared Silicon Valley versus Boston, because through the 1970s, guess who had a bigger tech economy? Boston. And Boston has MIT and Harvard. You've got Berkeley and Stanford over here. Today, I think Silicon Valley is probably 6 times the size of the Boston tech economy. What happened? And what they found was that in Boston, sure, people have their networks, but their networks are vertical networks. So I work at IBM, Leah works at IBM, Grow works at IBM. So yeah, I've got really good friends, but we all work at the same place. Whereas what they found in Silicon Valley was that, I work at a startup, Leah works at Stanford, Grow works at Google, and we're all good friends. And it's that cross-fertilization that brings. Yeah, and also, how do you But, hey, I need an introduction to an investor. Leah, who can you hook me up with? I need to know that she can hook me up with the person. So these network effects are tremendous. Network like maniacs over here. Turns out, like Leah and I first met at Berkeley some years ago. Well, we have a friend in common, right? Small world, right? Network like maniacs. The other thing, just my kind of parting comment from 19 years in working in startups, is that Nagin mentioned it too. Working in startups is really, really hard. You wake up every morning, you get punched in the mouth, right? That's just the way it is. You're not doing anything wrong. That's just the rule of the job. Don't be dismayed by that. Okay, that's just the rule of the job. What makes you a good entrepreneur is that you get punched in the mouth every morning, but you wake up the next morning and take it again. And you keep doing that, and guess what? You end up succeeding. So have at it.
Great. I want to piggyback on that actually, because when I first moved to Silicon Valley, I thought I would be exhausted by all of this networking. But then I found after a while that it actually gave me energy. But one thing I at least told myself is, your task is to go out and meet one new person every day, Monday to Thursday. Friday, you can actually work. You can do your work. But it helps you expand your network, and eventually it helps you into more serendipitous moments. So I fully support what you said, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences. We have 8 minutes for questions from the audience. Anyone? Yes, please.
Thank you for the great presentation. Maybe my question is that you think about big markets. There are a lot of smaller markets that I think are, or companies that are underserved. Think about pediatrics, orphan drugs, these types of things. Who should fund them? What would be the ideal model? Because those are needed too. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it might be that for something like that, you can actually have a bowling pin effect, where you address a smaller market as the first bowling pin, but the forces from success in that market actually translate to the next two, the next three, and the next four. So you actually are able to generalize. And it might be that you can't generalize that. This is just a small market. It just is, but that's okay. You will find people who will invest in things like that, but not VCs, because VCs, as Leah mentioned, we're driven by math. And we have, as Nagin mentioned, we have LPs who are expecting results. So we're kind of constrained into the kinds of deals we can invest in, because we need to drive big outcomes. And you only get big outcomes in big markets.
Just would want to add on that there are people investing out of what's called their family office. So it looks just like a VC fund, but it's private money. There are no external LPs to report to. And one of the things, since you did mention orphan drugs, I pointed out to some students recently that for almost every condition, there is some kind of family group. There is some kind of organization that is advocating for cures or improvements in care for a particular cause. And so those people actually are pretty sophisticated of who the best medical practitioners are for that condition and everything. And so they actually can open up business connections even though they're advocacy, let's say, for patient care. And so, and the same thing can happen in other sustainability areas where there might be nonprofits that actually can lead you to which businesses care and things. So think broadly about how you can try to find the people that have the resources to fund you. It may not be you go directly to them. It may be all these indirect connections are the ones that can direct you to fund them.
Hi. Shomit, I really liked your comment about new technology versus new business model and the importance of new business models. And new business models often end up creating new markets. For example, there was no market for video streaming when Netflix started. So how do you estimate the size of this market that doesn't exist yet?
So for this, it's the barbers in Chicago. What the heck is the barbers in Chicago? I might have mentioned this to you, but I've been lecturing on this forever. But here's how you do it. So if I were to come to you, Nikolai, and say, how many barbers are there in Chicago? If you're not very bright, you'd say, I'll walk up and down the streets, I'm going to count them. But being a smart guy, you're just going to use some proxy math. You're going to say, 3 million people in Chicago, 50% are male, 80% of males have hair. Guy gets his haircut once a month. Barber works 40 hours a week, 2 heads per hour. You do the math, 10,000. So what you've done is with completely defensible proxy math, you've come up with a qualitatively accurate number. The quantitative precision doesn't matter, because I don't care whether it's 9,700 or 11,014. But I do care, are there 10 barbers, 10,000, or 10 million? You're just proving to me that there are 10,000 barbers in Chicago. So when you sit down with the investor, actually the last thing you want to do is to say, Nikolai, I have this McKinsey report that says, because McKinsey does not talk about prospective markets. They report on things that have already happened. So if there's a McKinsey report, it's too late. So instead, you're going to sit down and say, Shomit, I'm going after this $40 billion a year market for. How'd you come up with this number? And you'll walk me through the barbers in Chicago. Oh, that makes sense. I buy that. Yeah. So in fact, you think about like Airbnb. There was no such thing as Airbnb, 15 years ago. How did they pitch that? I'm guessing they pitched it like this. They said, the hotel business is $2 trillion a year. We believe that 10% of those people can be served by people renting out a room. Oh, no, I don't think 10%. I think it's only 5. Oh, it's still a $100 billion a year market. Here's my check, right? And that's how they did it. So, that answer your question? Barbers in Chicago.
I love that answer. I'd love to add another one, which is sometimes you can find some kind of comparable company to give you insights. So if somebody would have told you about what was happening inside Netflix, you would have realized that what the driver was whenever they could ship a disc within one day, they had a chance of getting a customer. So if you knew something about how they expanded by having warehouses and distribution centers in multiple places, you could start to look for comparable companies for your industry like that. So you say, well, we're just like this other company. What was the driver of their scale was this kind of thing. So we know we need to do X, and then we can scale at the same rate to the same size as they are. If you know that, for a lot of companies, the speed, you have adoption of high-speed internet around the world has what's been the driver of their ability to scale. So if you know what your drivers are, you can actually have a very credible conversation about what's going to happen within 5 years for your technology. And you can use analogies of comparable companies or other technologies.